A crisis in a comic book can mean a lot of things. Generally though, when you hear the word crisis as part of a title or a plot in a story within the panels, it's hard to not assume that the narrative will have something to do with a crossover or major story event that threatens to disrupt the universe's continuity or current status quo. That was a mouthful. So today we are coming at you with our list of the top 10 superhero crises you won't believe exist. More so because a lot of the circumstances surrounding them are shocking, baffling, or horribly redundant cries for help in sorting out a messy continuity. So we are going to focus on major events in the comic book world that acted as major crises for superpowered individuals and metahumans rather than personal crises. Although if you want a part 2 and want to hear about Hank Pym and Booster Gold's depleting mental health, you guys let us know in those comments below. And yes, this list will be a little DC heavy, friends. I mean, it's like every 3 years that they pump out another story with the name Crisis in it, so get that crisis counter going, because I'm gonna say that word a lot. Starting us off in at number 10, the Evolutionary War. Let's begin this list with some Marvel numbers that won't make your head hurt with continuity confusion. In 1988, Marvel tried something new that would later define how they would hash out extended crossovers. The Evolutionary War story event ran through most of 1988 annuals, a format that would be repeated by the publisher over the course of the next 4 years and act as a foundation on how they published their crossovers for decades to come. The storyline behind it was a crisis indeed. The High Evolutionary, one of the world's premier geneticists, had created something called Counter-Earth. It would catch the interest of the Beyonders, who invaded and captured the planet to transform it into a cosmic museum of curiosities. How bougie. The High Evolutionary goes mad and ends up attempting to commit suicide but fails, and the rest of the story event sees the High Evolutionary unleashing attacks across the globe in order to guide the way of human evolution. Talk about a bit of a breakdown there. I mean, generally when I have a breakdown, it just means I'm going to be sitting in my apartment watching Drag Race on repeat for like 5 hours eating something like ramen. Up next at number 9, Infinity Wars. Okay, spoiler alert for this one since it is fairly recent and went down last year. Last year being 2018, at the time of this recording. In 2018, there was an event called Infinity Countdown in which Pymtron, Ultron wearing Hank Pym's skin, it was a whole thing, goes after the Infinity Gems that were recreated when the multiverse was restored. It was followed by a massive event titled Infinity Wars in which there was a cosmic madness that occurred. As in, everyone wanted to get their mitts on the stones and kind of went mental about it. And a new foe named Requiem, who turned out to be Gamora, manages to get them all. That led to a spin-off story called Infinity Warps, in which Gamora uses the stones to reduce the universe's life forms in half, which led to creative concoctions the likes of Soldier Supreme, which was Steve Rogers and Dr. Stephen Strange combined, both physically, in abilities, and in character origins. Eventually our heroes come to, they realize this isn't right and that they've been trapped inside of the Soul Stone's soul world, where a cosmic entity named Devondra is waiting to feed. Yum. And what does Devondra feed on? Hank Pym's soul, of course, because dude can never catch a break, can he? Next up at number 8, Maximum Security. The premise of Marvel's Maximum Security always feels wonderfully tongue-in-cheek to me, since it's something that feels entirely believable in the scope of the Marvel Universe. Running between 2000 and 2001, the story synopsis is this. Fed up with Earth's interference in intergalactic affairs, the starfaring alien community quarantines the Soul System and turns Earth into a prison for the universe's worst criminals. So the first half of that is like almost downright hilarious, because of course the extraterrestrial communities outside of Earth would get fed up with how nosy Earth is. The second half, the whole prison thing, is a little extreme. Sure, quarantine us, but don't punish us by tossing the worst of the worst down onto our little blue planet. Please. May not have been a galactic crisis, but definitely a crisis on our home planet. Next up at number 7, Infinity Gauntlet. Infinity Gauntlet was a 6-issue comic released in 1991 that was a major game changer. It was so popular that it birthed 2 immediate sequels, and now it is largely responsible for the vast success the Marvel Cinematic Universe is rooted in, or at least their recent stories are rooted in as far as narrative foundations are. When Steve Englehart pitched then editor-in-chief Tom DeFalco the idea of Mistress Death getting Thanos to get revenge on her enemies, DeFalco, whose immediate reaction was, "Who's Thanos?" fell in love with the idea once he found out who Thanos was. True story there. And proposed it play out in a summer crossover event, the likes of Evolutionary War. In terms of format, Jim Starlin, Thanos' creator, was then brought into the fray to write it, who then turned Thanos into a twisted anti-hero, purposely writing the characters to have multiple layers and complexities throughout the tale. It then became an epic clash between Thanos and all of the heroes of the universe. Literally, all of Earth's heroes, a bunch of cosmic entities, you name it. Adam Warlock, who was the leader, got them all together to fight Thanos, and they actually failed. But then Nebula, who Thanos was torturing, got her wits about her when he was distracted, got the gauntlet, and that led to his downfall. More stuff happened too. Anywho, it is one of Marvel's most epic stories, and makes sense why it's been so successful in its adaptation in the MCU. Up next at number 6, Crisis on Infinite Earths. And now, my friends, we begin our journey through the crises of the DC universe, which you all know are crises because they legit have the word crisis in all of their titles. So let's start off this journey of bafflement with the crisis that really jump-started DC's infatuation with crises. Crisis on Infinite Earths. Crisis on Infinite Earths was the first serialized 12-issue limited series from DC between 1985 and 1986. It was also a massive crossover event with a slew of tie-ins. So, long story short, the plot follows villain Anti-Monitor attacking the DC multiverse with the intention of completely destroying it, but luckily is thwarted despite the high death count number, which included Barry Allen and the original Supergirl, Kara Zor-El. The conclusion of this event was even more monumental than the event itself. It created a singular Earth in the place of the multiverse and resulted in the whole DC universe being rebooted. The first of many reboots. Moving on to number 5, Infinite Crisis. Infinite Crisis was the sequel of sorts to Crisis on Infinite Earths. Published in 2005 and running through 2006, the limited series revisited characters, themes, and concepts depicted in its predecessor. But, most importantly, it addressed the existence of DC's multiverse. Crisis on Infinite Earths condensed the DC multiverse into one Earth. And then, Infinite Crisis was like, nah, let's re-expand it into a proper multiverse again and bring back a bunch of characters from Earth 2 and oh look, there's a bunch of pre-Crisis characters kicking around and doing stuff now. And it also included a lot of Superboy Prime punching people's heads off and doing other stupid and deadly fatal things. But it also had a ridiculous number of pre-orders and was a top seller in the month of its release, so something's gotta give. And at number 4, Final Crisis. Oh, Final Crisis. A crossover event named after the 7-issue miniseries by Grant Morrison, which had the same title. It was described as the Day Evil 1 in its promo materials. Final Crisis had Barry Allen narrating and saw him returning during this 2008-2009 arc, with the plot dealing with Darkseid's scheme to overthrow reality, along with the deaths and corruption of various characters. Fun stuff. Personally, my favorite part about it was DC's obvious struggle to have this crisis stand out. Now, to help readers figure out what was what, they started putting a sightings banner on all the covers of the important comics, which they defined as, I quote, signposts, marking important story beats and moments throughout the DC universe. But guess what, friends? Final Crisis definitely wasn't the Final Crisis, because we're about to get another crisis courtesy of DC. So not only was Final Crisis not even that great, but it also doesn't live up to its name, which arguably cheapens it and makes it sad. But more on that crisis a little later on in our list. Moving on to number 3, Identity Crisis. So Identity Crisis is arguably a much smaller crisis in terms of scale, but it was an important crisis nonetheless. Crisis, and is often credited for changing some of the behavioral traits of certain heroes. Specifically, Bruce Wayne and his ability to trust in his peers. Batman became known for being paranoid in the years that followed as a result of the events of this story. So, what exactly goes down in Identity Crisis? A whole lot of terrible things, that's what. Long story short, Sue Dibney is revealed to be murdered, and then revealed to have been raped. Then Zatanna and the Justice League wipe everybody's minds. Batman walks in, freaks out about it, so they beat him up and wipe his mind. Then everyone realizes Superman has super hearing and probably heard the rape, and then he cries a single manly tear. And they all wonder if they're bad people. Newsflash, they are. And then it's revealed that a mind wipe happened in which the secret society of supervillains discovered the heroes' identities, and then Zatanna erased the villains' minds so that they would forget their identities, and Batman figures it all out and is forever paranoid. That's the gist of it. Yeah. Up next at number 2, Heroes in Crisis. Heroes in Crisis came out in 2018 and ran through 2019, and despite being called Crisis, it is more of a murder mystery in the vein of our last number rather than a multiverse-shattering event. Thankfully. It's kinda like a PSA for mental health, and the mental health issues of superheroes in particular, which, yes, is important and neat, but it's also really inconsistent in terms of how characters are portrayed. Spoiler alert, friends. You ready? Wally West ends up having a mental breakdown and kills a bunch of characters, which is then blamed on Harley Quinn and Booster Gold because Wally runs the future, kills himself, and then brings back his corpse in order to shed all onus. Actually. Now regardless, the Crisis title got some heat with Jim Lee having to tweet out that the rumors of this Crisis storyline being a reboot was ridiculous, which is actually kind of hilarious considering our next and final number. And at number 1, 5G. No, we are not talking about your cell phone service, friends. We are talking about DC's latest attempt to reinvent their universe and ruin things you love. And of course, reboot a bunch of shit. Sorry, harsh, we know, but considering that this list contains multiple references to multiple universe resets, you can imagine some fans' frustration over this. So, what is 5G? Let's backtrack for a hot second here. Earlier this year, DC debuted a character named Tempest Fuganot. Fuganot? Fuino? Fugino. I don't know, let's just go with Fugginot because that pronunciation is dumb and this whole thing is dumb. So feel free to correct me in the comments, friends. I actually would like to know, but for now it's Fugginot. Despite my mocking of Tempest's name, the character is actually pretty dope. It's part of the Fugginots, a race of cosmic beings whose sole purpose is to prevent intrusions from other universes. The Fugginos does sound better in that sense. After the whole Dark Knight's Metal event, where the evil demon Barbados tries to invade the regular multiverse, Tempest was like, yo, no more of these shenanigans, not on my watch. Even if he has a watch, it's probably an internal cosmic clock of his time. And Tempest decided to stop the dimension hopping hero Sideways, who is basically Spider-Man, but instead of web slinging, he just opens and jumps through dimensions like the villain Spot. Anywho, now Tempest, in Tales of the Dark Multiverse Nightfall, has foreseen a new Crisis event, in which he literally states, "A crisis is coming, perhaps the greatest yet, and if the multiverse is to survive, it must be stronger." Now, as of this recording, various different comic news sites have been reporting that the Crisis will involve mainstays in the DC universe stepping down and passing off their mantles to other characters, but new ones, so no, there isn't going to be a Robin who becomes a Batman. This is meant to help explain why heroes who debuted in the Golden Age have managed to stick around for so long. The DC timeline and its past will be split into 4 generations, the first defined by Wonder Woman being the first public superhero in the DC universe, something that's like kind of newly canon, the second generation starting with the appearance of Superman, the third starting with Crisis on Infinite Earths and going until Flashpoint, and the 4th generation being what we're reading today, making 5G the future 5th generation of what's next. And also good to have on your cell phone. Like, we get why you're doing this, DC, but do we really need something more to muddle up the already messy history that you boast? I don't know. Give me your 2 cents in those comments below, friends. Alright, there we have it, friends. Which of these would you classify as the biggest comic book crisis of all time? Give us a shout in those comments below and let us know. If you guys dug this video, spread that love, hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe to Top 10 Nerd for more lists just like this one. In the meantime though, thanks for watching, friends. I'll catch you all in the next video.